But otherwise, when there is no Gilui, that Torah could come min hashamayim. Now, as I said, Rav Reuven Margolius brings many, many applications. Tonight, I chose one of his numerous cases that he brings down. He goes through many. The one where somebody's dream 1,000 years ago is nageh al halacha to all of us today. And it happens to be, it's an area of halacha where I think many of us, perhaps most of us, are not well versed. And it's kedai, it's worthwhile to spend time and become familiar with one area of halacha which comes up in the parsha in a few weeks. And that has to do with the halacha of kosher fish. Which fish are kosher? Now you ask a child, he knows, how can you tell if it's a kosher fish? You have to look for the right simonim. An OU or an OK. Okay. The Torah says that kosher fish have scales and fins. Not the kasher. Of course, that was when fish used to come from the oceans before they came in bottles and packages. And the Gemara tells us further that we can rely. That kol dag sheyesh lo kasher yesh lo snapir. Any fish that has scales on it has fins. So as a matter of practical halacha, if a mashgiach wants to know if a fish is kosher, how do you decide if a fish is kosher? Fish, when you catch them from the ocean, they don't come labeled with their names. There are many, many, countless types of fish. So a mashgiach has to check only for scales. If there are scales on the fish, we rely, kol sheyesh lo kasher, yesh lo snapir. If it has scales, we rely that it has fins. So why does the Torah say a siman of fins? So that's a kasher. There's a dispute about how to deal with that. But as a matter of halacha, any fish with scales, we assume has fins. And the Ramban in Parsha Shmini has a very important criteria. How do you decide if scales are really scales? Now to us, who've never really gone fishing except in a local lake, it seems easy. You look, it has scales or it doesn't have scales. If it has scales, it's kosher. If not, not. In fact, there are numerous types of scales that can be found on a fish. Basically, there are 4 types of scales which can be found on fish, and not all are kosher. The Ramban writes that a kaskeses, the word kaskeses, scale, is related to kaskasim, which are the plated armor that we learned in Shmuel Aleph that Goliath was wearing. Plated armor is a lavush, it's a baguette, something worn on the body. Says the Ramban, the kaskasim of a fish has to be something on the body, not part of the body. If the scales cannot be peeled off, they're not kosher scales. Scales have to be scaled haniklotim, which can be peeled. Some fish have scales which cannot be peeled, and those fish are not kosher. The Ramban is brought down la halacha by the Ramah in Yeridea and in Tegimel Sifalus. And this is important halacha to know, that you should know if you're stuck which fish are kosher and which are not. If you're ever stuck, you catch a fish and you want to eat it, and you can eat fish that are caught, you check the scales that peel off. Most scales peel off very easily. I remember once, somebody had the opportunity to do the Kaim Shmuel Hakan. He got the egg out of the nest, and he came to me to ask me, what does he do with the egg? I told him, you eat it. He said, eat? It sounded disgusting to me. Eat an egg that comes from a nest? It was almost absurd. But yes, a real egg. But you should know how to tell if a fish is kosher. You have to be able to peel the skin, peel the scales off. You go fishing, you peel off the scales, that's a kosher fish. You don't have to check the tray. A fish is kosher just as is. Doesn't have to be salted. You don't chef it. Once it has scales, that's all you need. Now, there was a dispute goes back about 25 years. Regarding the kashrus of a shark or swordfish, fish which have scales which cannot be peeled. About 30 years ago, the conservative movement came out and were makshir swordfish and shark because they have scales on their body. But their scales are not peeled. The scale of a shark is, if you pull it off, you have to pull off some of the skin as well because it grows from under the outer skin. It's actually a very hard scale and it does not peel off and it's not kosher. The mystery is why the conservative movement would bother saying that shark is kosher. I'd love for them to find me somebody who eats it from their movement who eats it only because they say it's kosher. It's a mystery like their sock that the conservative shita is that you're not allowed to drive on Shabbos except the shul. I challenge the conservative leaders to say they have 1 million conservative Jews in the United States to find 10 who drive only to shul and otherwise don't drive on Shabbos. At any rate, that was their psak. It's interesting, in the Jewish Observer in 68, Rabbi Tendler wrote an article challenging them. He writes that their source for this psak was the Talmudical Encyclopedia, which had a picture of a shark with scales on it. And the caption under the picture said that it had scales, and that was the source of the responsa that it's kosher. Rabbi Tendler, in his inimitable style, said that there's a stira in the encyclopedia, Talmudical Encyclopedia, I'm not familiar which one they were talking about, because although in the picture it says a shark has scales, but in the list of kosher fish, it says that it's a non-kosher fish. So the only conclusion you can come to is that the conservative rabbis only looked at the pictures and did not read the text. At any rate, the halacha of a swordfish or a shark is really not debatable. That's definitely not a kosher fish, no matter what dream a person might have. The shiloh that does exist is in regard to a sturgeon. A sturgeon, which is a fish, most sturgeon are caught out in the Caspian Sea, Russia, or in neighboring countries. And the sturgeon has a scale, which you cannot peel. If you catch a sturgeon, you won't be able to peel off the scale. But if you cook the sturgeon, if you put it in boiling water for a while, and then rub the scales, they will come off. The question is that a kosher fish or not? Now you might ask, who cares? The answer is that sturgeon is a very, very kosher of a fish, if such a thing exists. Because in the belly of a sturgeon are the eggs of a sturgeon, which are made into caviar, which I'm told is a delicious food. Those eggs are served as black caviar, and that is one place where the question is important. Is it a kosher fish or not? And additionally, it's very negaya here in the United States for a side use. Most smokehouses in the United States smoke 4 types of fish. They smoke 3 types of fish which are kosher: sable, whitefish, and salmon, that are known to us as lox, and sturgeon. Those are the 4 types of fish that are smoked. If sturgeon would be a kosher fish, it would be a lot easier to give a hefsher on these smokehouses. It would be like any other plant, where you come and go and make sure that the ingredients are kosher. If sturgeon is not a kosher fish, then you really need a mashgiach there all the time to be sure that the sturgeon, which is being smoked, is not smoked in the same utensils, in the same place as smoked fish, as sable. Lox, they say lox is a Jewish fish. Happens to be that lox is the easiest fish as far as the smoked fish is to get a hefsher, because it's smoked differently. It's smoked, it's cold smoke, or shiloh fish alakum on lox. It's not in the same type of smoking as the other fish. Some that's the makar for serving it at a bris, of course. But as far as the other types of smoked fish, it's a serious problem if sturgeon is not a kosher fish. The Nodע Biyehuda, Tanina, Yeridea, Simin Chavches writes, without referring to the sturgeon by name, referring to a different type of fish, that yes, if you cook it and then you can peel off the scales, it's kasher. Yes, it's kasher. And he writes more, if you have to add some type of acid or soap when you cook it, and only then you can peel off the scales, it's still kasher. And this caused somewhat of a tumult in Europe. I guess they like caviar. And there are two letters printed in Nodע Yehuda Tinyana, Chavtes and Lamed. After the Nodע Yehuda passed away, his son, Rav Yisrael, defended a rumor that his father had changed his mind on this particular stock, and he defended it rather strongly. There was one Rav who prints his name in the letter and writes him a letter and tells him that it's not true. This person claimed that the Nodע Yehuda changed his stock and held that it was non-kosher, and writes his son, Yimcha lima alasai, forgive me. Shedavar zehu sheker muchlis. What you're saying is a lie. Upshita she'em alasai nemam b'zeh. It's obvious to me that you're not to be believed. And he writes that his father, the Nodע Yehuda, after printing the first Nodע Yehuda, made copies of every tshuva he wrote. And this supposed letter that the Nodע Yehuda wrote recanting his previous hechsher on this type of fish, he says it must be untrue. Now it seems this letter made somewhat of a tumult in Europe, because this Rav wrote back defending his own coverage, like, how can you call me a liar? So there's another letter printed. The Milamed is the Nodע Yehuda, where his son writes, Mashem is loinei, this which you complain, Asher kasafti shamalasai einai neman, and this which I wrote that you're not to be believed, ha'emes agi, I'll tell you the truth, shemalasai huchzik kafrin ba'esik seh, that you're just lying. What can I do? And he claims rather strongly that the Nodע Yehuda never recanted. Now in that shul he refers to certain types of fish. One of them is spelled Aleph Sin Test Resh Yud Aleph Nun, Tyrion, which is referring to the surgeon. There's a Tshuva in Melamed Lahayo Sinuchav Aleph when he says so, that this was one of the 2 or 3 fish under discussion, and that the sturgeon is this type of fish. Now where does this machlokes, the Shaila, come from? The Shaila did not start in the 1700s, in the time of the Nodע Yehuda, but actually, at least according to the Shuvah of the Nodע Yehuda's son, the debate has to do with the Hagar Tashri and a Taisis in Avodah Zarah. The Hagar Tashri in Avodah Zarah, Perek Beis, Siman Memvav, writes the following. He records the debate about a fish called the burbita. That's not an English name, that's the name, the Aramaic name, the burbita. And the Hagar Tashri says, Harashbam Kosav B'Shem Rabbeinu Shloimai, Da'ainu Daktar Shekayred Barbita. That the Gemara there is referring to this type of fish, and it's a kosher fish, it's a daktar. Rav Yehuda Achasid Amar, Rav Yehuda Achasid said, Kol Misha Yechol Burbita, Ma Yizker Lecho L'Viyasam. If you eat your barbita, you're trading it in for the L'Viyasam. The L'Viyasam, the fish which Tzadikim will eat L'Olam Haba. So you get your choice. It's one or the other. He held it's not kosher. Upamecha Sitirei Rabbeinu Ephraim. Rabbeinu Ephraim, the Balataisis, said, burbita is a kosher fish. V'amu Loi B'Chaloim, that night he had a dream, and they told him, Shehitir Shurasim. And the way the dream is brought down, they served him a plate full of shurasim. And he said, what are you serving me shurasim for? And he answered him, well, you are matir shurasim. And then he woke up and said, I made a mistake. I was matir the burbita. So because of the he got up the next day and he answered it. And therefore says Hagar Tashri, if you don't eat this burbita, so Yenuchu like brachas al-Raisha, you'll have a bracha. Why is the burbita? What type of fish is it? There's no clue in the Hagar Tashri. In Taisis, it seems that the burbita is a fish that when it's taken out of the water, it sheds its scales. Fish. And they're kosher. However, the Nodע Yehuda brings down of the Achrayim who said no. It doesn't mean when you take it out of the ocean it sheds its scales. It means when you take it out of water, you cook it in water, and you take it out of the water, then the scales can be peeled. Which is the fish we're talking about, the sturgeon. And that, in actuality, this sturgeon was the whole Bobita Machlokes. This was the Shiloh that they were talking about. If so, to argue many Achrayim, those who wrote to the Nodע Yehuda's son, that Zagar Tashrim, we have Rabbeinu Ephraim's dream, which offers this sturgeon. So the Nodע Yehuda wrote back, or rather the Nodע Yehuda's son wrote back, defending his sack, defending his father's sack and his kasher. He finds in a writing that perhaps the Ramban himself once tried this experiment, cooking fish and then peeling the scales. And he addresses directly in Siman Lamed the dream of Rabbeinu Ephraim. And writes, Rabbeinu Shmuel, son of the Nodע Yehuda, Ani Yomer, Divrei Chaloimai, Loy Mailim V'Loy Marim. Dreams don't count. It doesn't matter what you dream. And nobody ever came and passed it halacha based on a dream. And dreams have foolishness in them. Although Rabbeinu Ephraim was a great person, and he was afraid because of his dream. And he said, maybe it's true. It doesn't matter. The Komakan. If he had known for sure, as we know, as Taisa Shita is, that this fish does have scales, he would have said, oh, they meant something else in my dream. They didn't mean this fish. One of the other Balei HaTaisis have in dream. And he points out an interesting Gemara in Sanhedrin Daf Lamed. The Gemara says in Sanhedrin Daf Lamed Amid Beis, somebody had tsar. He knew his father had money. His father died. Didn't tell him where the money was hidden. People hide money in the funniest places. And this was certainly true before there were banks.